Babe of the day. Babe of the day. Jayne Mansfield, Part 4. Wow, I never thought I'd be making a Part 4 of Jayne Mansfield. My Babe of the Day videos have changed a lot since I first started making them. Initially, I thought it would be cool to just show a lot of pictures of women I admired while talking over them, sharing some of my thoughts while giving out a little bit of information. That's what I did for my first 3 Jayne Mansfield videos. Over time, as I started doing more videos, I thought it would be more interesting for the viewer if I did heavy research and made them biographical. Although my Babe of the Day videos aren't full biographies, I do like to give an overview of the subject. It's something I didn't do in the first 3 Jayne Mansfield videos that I would like to do now. Jayne Mansfield was born as Vera Jane Palmer. Although she was born in Pennsylvania, she spent much of her early childhood in New Jersey. Jayne had the worst things happen to her in cars. When she was just 3 years old, she was riding in the car her dad was driving when he died of a heart attack. Up until then, he had been a hotshot lawyer. Jayne's mom actually came from a well-to-do family. When Jayne was 6, her mother remarried to a man named Harry Piers, and they moved to Dallas, Texas. When she was growing up, Jayne was known as Vera Jane Piers. From a very early age, show business just called to her, and she wanted to be like legendary child star Shirley Temple. In retrospect, this is kind of funny, because Jayne took a very different career turn. There wasn't much the same between Shirley and Jayne. Jayne grew up early in more ways than one. At the age of 12, she started taking ballroom dance lessons. In high school, she started playing multiple instruments, but became a virtuoso on the violin. Footage of Jayne playing the violin exists, and she's quite excellent at it. No one ever thinks of Jayne as a master violinist, but if she had wanted to focus on that, I do believe she would have made it. She also studied other languages like Spanish and German. Vera Jane was never dumb, but she would ultimately make her name as the ultimate bubble-headed bimbo. One dumb thing that she actually did do, however, was marry for the first time at the age of 17. I don't care who a person is or how mature they are. Marrying at the age of 17 is not a wise idea. Jayne married Paul Mansfield, another aspiring actor, in 1950. Although they were officially divorced after 8 years, Jayne kept his last name for the rest of her life. Within the first year of marriage, they had a daughter, Jayne Marie Mansfield. Years later, Jayne Marie would become an actress and model, although she never reached the height of fame as her mother. Early on, there were signs that the marriage wasn't working. Paul was starting to keep Jayne from certain opportunities. In 1951, Jayne briefly went to LA. She entered the Miss California contest, but Paul forced her to withdraw. Back in Texas, she continued to study acting while working all kinds of jobs like being a nude art model, door-to-door saleswoman, and a secretary at a dance studio. She did, though, enter a lot of local area beauty contests and won many of them. Jayne even rejected a couple. In early 1954, the Mansfields moved to LA. Jayne was getting screen tests, and the whole acting thing was looking more positive. Still, she worked all kinds of unglamorous odd jobs like selling popcorn and candy and teaching dance. She did, however, get modeling jobs with the Blue Book Model Agency. Believe it or not, in the early days, there were some advertisers who considered Jayne's top heaviness to be undesirable. For real. The things that made her most famous held her back. Well, the world has always had idiots. Jayne had the sense to stick to her guns, and it paid off in dividends. After losing some early commercials and movie roles, Jayne realized something. She had to go blonde. Fake platinum blonde hair was just the thing to have at that time, and it made an actress more marketable. Her real hair color was dark brown, and she looked great as a brunette, but the blonde hair popped, and it really completed the picture. After she did this, there really was nobody else who could match her. She purposely decided to emulate Marilyn Monroe. Jayne's real voice was husky, and she had a Texas accent. Since Marilyn was everything at that time, and being like her got you work, Jayne decided to copy Marilyn's vocal mannerisms and really exaggerate that image. What I don't think even Jayne realized is that she was developing a distinct persona because her voice, in trying to imitate Marilyn, had its own thing going on. Jayne talked in soft coos, capped off with high-pitched squeals. Not to mention that she really played up the dumbness as a public persona, where Marilyn did not. In 1954, Jayne made pink her signature color. She wore pink and would ultimately have a pink house and a pink Cadillac. More on that later. She hasn't come into money yet. Jayne got her first acting job in October of 1954. It was on the TV series Lux Video Theater. In her episode, she sat at a piano and delivered a few lines of dialogue. What really made Jayne Mansfield's career, though, was Playboy magazine. She made her first appearance in the magazine in the February 1955 issue. This was a huge success. Not only did it help Playboy circulation, but it made a name out of Jayne Mansfield. Success came at a price, though, and the Mansfields separated. Paul was a bit envious anyway, because she was making it and he wasn't. On top of that, this was the guy that didn't want her to go out for Miss California. A nude photo spread in Playboy was way worse, and it was clear that she wasn't going to stop. It would have been stupid if Jayne had stopped. Paul would have been wise if he had just loosened up and let Jayne have her moment. Instead, in late 1956, he sought custody of their daughter, alleging that Jayne was an unfit mother because she posed for Playboy. Jayne won the custody battle. It was an ugly divorce that didn't finalize until 1958. Jayne's first film came out in January of 1955. It was actually a substantial role in a low-budget film noir mystery thriller called Female Jungle. Jayne played Candy Price, an artist mistress. The next month, she got a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. This sounds like a great thing, and it should have been, but they misused Jayne, giving her only small parts in 3 movies, 2 of them uncredited. Warner just wanted her to be a contract player, eye candy to dress up a scene without any real substance. Jayne wasn't liking this and got out of her contract. Her next job, surprising enough, was a major gig on Broadway. The play was called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? Orson Bean and Walter Matthau were her co-stars. It premiered in October of 1955. Jayne Mansfield only got the part because Mamie Van Doren had rejected it. This was a bad move on Mamie's part, but a great bit of fortune for Jayne. She played a fictional actress named Rita Marlowe, who was an obvious parody of Marilyn Monroe. The play was a major success, and all the Hollywood studios that had turned Jayne down and gave her a rough time were now knocking on her door. The Rock Hunter play came at a good time for Jayne. When she accepted the part, she was filming a movie called The Burglar, in which she was the leading lady. The movie was another film noir, but made for Columbia Pictures. For whatever reason, the movie was shelved for 2 years, only getting released because of Jayne's newfound popularity. Jayne was grateful for the opportunity that the Rock Hunter Broadway play gave her. She played Rita Marlowe for nearly a year, even after she got a major film contract from 20th Century Fox. The Fox contract from May of 1956 came out because they were looking for a successor to Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn was always difficult for the studio and other actors to work with. They wanted someone with that same blonde bombshell appeal, but who was a bit more professional. I know people who met Jayne Mansfield, and one thing they all say is that she was a friendly, likable personality, the kind of Hollywood encounter you wanted to have. Believe it or not, a lot of the actors and actresses you like on screen can be real jerks if you meet them in person. Jayne actually treated other people nice, and she seemed to like her fans. Also in May of 1956, she met muscle man Mickey Hargitay, who won the Mr. Universe title the previous year. She was already separated from Paul, and fell for Mickey immediately. He proposed to Jayne the next year, but they waited for the divorce to be officially finalized before they married in early 1958. Jayne's first film for Fox turned out to be the 1956 super hit The Girl Can't Help It. Named after a Little Richard song, it was a musical comedy that featured a lot of rock and roll stars. There were a number of rock and roll comedy films before and after this, but most of them never became that successful. This movie was something special. It actually had a good story and a good cast of actors. Not to mention the outstanding selection of musical guests. Fats Domino, Little Richard, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, The Platters, Julie London, Nino Tempo, and more. The movie did three big things. 1, it made a star out of Jayne Mansfield. 2, it locked her into the bubble-headed bimbo roles that she used for her public persona. Finally, since this rock and roll movie hit it in a big, big way, the movie industry kept making them for well over a decade, deep into the psychedelic era. It is certainly a significant moment in Hollywood history. 1956 was also a good year for Jayne in television. She got her first leading lady role on TV in an episode of The Bachelor. She appeared on TV a lot, making $20,000 per episode. This was extremely good at that time. Jayne was a draw, and every TV show, comedy, drama, or game wanted her to be on it. What most people still fail to give Jayne credit for is the fact that she was actually a good actress. She played dumb for comedy purposes, but actually had good comic timing. Jayne could also do drama very well, although it took a back seat to comedy. Whenever she was on a TV show, it was an event. You would see her do something cool, whether it was a skit, playing the violin, or slyly showing off her true intelligence by reciting poetry or speaking a foreign language. Jayne actually knew 5 languages. After The Girl Can't Help It came out and was a super hit, Columbia Pictures found it in their hearts to release Jayne's long-shelved movie, The Burglar, in 1957. This movie threw a lot of people off because Jayne was playing a straight dramatic role. Jayne was good at dramatics, but people liked seeing her in funny, sexy roles. Jayne herself seemed to enjoy those kinds of parts. Jayne really wasn't dumb at all. She knew that male movie watchers didn't want to see the girl next door types. They could find the girl next door in their own neighborhood. Men wanted the kind of goddess they couldn't easily find. Someone who was over-the-top sexy in every way possible. So she played fun, dumb, non-boring blondes. And it hit big. She never forgot her Playboy success, and it became a tradition, after her February 1955 issue, to appear in it every February through 1958. She appeared in it one last time in February 1960. Since then, her photos have been reprinted many times in special Playboy publications. After 1956, she could have left Playboy behind. She was already a star and didn't need to do it, but she seemed to like it. She would even send thank you notes to the photographers for doing the shoots. Jayne's next movie at Fox, in 1957, was the drama film The Wayward Bus. She attempted to move away from her bimbo image, and a lot of people consider this her best acting. However, the film performed only modestly at the box office. Jayne was still sexy, but more serious, and it didn't wow audiences like The Girl Can't Help It. Fox knew their next movie with Jayne had to up the ante, so why not a film version of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? The Broadway play was a huge success, so why not get Jayne to reprise her role? They got Jayne, but the story of the movie was entirely different from the play. Jayne played Rita Marlowe. It was still called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and that was about all that was the same. Mickey Hargitay, who would become her husband the next year, had a small part in the movie. He would go on to have a decent acting career after this. Instead of a story where a man sells his soul to the devil to become a successful screenwriter, the movie is a satire on TV advertising and Hollywood hype in general. This was probably a wise decision because the movie was a hit. It became known as Jayne's signature film. No matter where Jayne's career went after this, she was always going to be a remembered name. In November of 1957, when she was with Mickey, but not yet married to him, she bought a huge 40-room mansion formerly owned by Rudy Vallée. It was bought with money from an inheritance. To carry out her image, Jayne painted everything pink and really made the place a sight to behold. She called it the Pink Palace, and it became an LA landmark. It really was a beautiful place. A year after that, she drove around a huge pink Cadillac, which was the first and, for a while, the only pink Cadillac in Hollywood. Jayne's final film of 1957, with Cary Grant, was a flop. Kiss Them For Me was a romantic comedy, and the plain point of fact is that there are too many other characters in the movie that distract from Jayne. I think audiences wanted to see Jayne with Cary. Instead, Cary's main love interest is played by Susie Parker, and Jayne falls for Ray Walston's character. In 1958, Jayne made one more movie for Fox with the Western comedy The Sheriff of Fractured Jaw. This actually did well, and was worthy of Jayne Mansfield. It did even better in England than it did in America. Still, it wasn't the super success that The Girl Can't Help It and Rock Hunter had been. Fox was tired of promoting Jayne, and they foolishly dismissed her. They could have made a lot more money with her. This movie was Jayne's last mainstream movie success. That is not to say Jayne Mansfield was washed up, not even a little bit. She had name power and worked a lot after this. Jayne was famous for her publicity stunts and always had been. She and Mickey did live shows where he did his muscle man stuff, flinging Jayne all around in her leopard spot bikini. Then there were the accidental on purpose wardrobe malfunctions. She kept herself in the spotlight. There was very little of her life that was kept private, and she welcomed photographers at any time. This was not the wisest thing to do, and it ultimately worked against her, personally and professionally. It's hard to live as a public figure anyway, and Jayne was extremely public. She was also famous for her nightclub acts. In early 1958, she started doing striptease reviews. She continued doing this for the rest of her life, making $35,000 a week. Jayne also did public appearances, making $10,000 a shot for things like grocery store openings. Jayne made serious money, more money than a lot of her movie star colleagues, male or female. Jayne and Mickey also had a number of successful business ventures. She was still under contract to Fox, though, and they loaned out Jayne to foreign productions until her contract expired in 1962. This was a crappy way to treat her, and a lot of the films she made in England and Italy are considered odd, with some of them being lost. Jayne took this as an opportunity to do some roles that mainstream Hollywood wouldn't allow her to do. Although she still took on a lot of work, It had to be between pregnancies because she had 3 children with Mickey. Their youngest, Mariska, was born in 1964. You may know the name of Mariska Hargitay because she went on to become a super successful actress and the star of Law & Order Special Victims Unit. Some of the movies Jayne did during this period were well liked, despite what they were. In 1960, she filmed a couple of gangster movies in England, The Challenge and Too Hot to Handle. They weren't released in America until later. There was a scene in Too Hot to Handle where Mansfield appeared nearly nude, and the US censors had a field day with it. The movie was renamed Playgirl After Dark and released in 1961. The Challenge didn't get released until 1963. One of the best remembered movies she did after her mainstream Hollywood success is a Hercules movie called The Loves of Hercules in 1960. Filmed in Italy, she played Queen Deianira, or Hippolyta depending on which language version you watch. Jayne's voice was dubbed by Carolyn de Fonseca. Her husband, Mickey, played Hercules. The Loves of Hercules was never released theatrically in the US. It did, however, appear on TV in 1966. This movie was distributed internationally under the title Hercules vs. the Hydra. Today, a lot more people know about it thanks to low-budget DVD releases. It doesn't have the polish of her early box office successes. It doesn't even have her voice. But the idea of Jayne being the sexy queen in a Hercules movie is hot, and a lot of people like it. In 1961, she appeared in The George Raft Story. Filmed in England, the movie starred Ray Danton as George Raft, the famous Hollywood heavy. The movie took a lot of creative liberties with George Raft's real story. Jayne played the part of Lisa Lang, a glamorous film star based on Betty Grable. It wasn't released in America until 1962, but it was well liked. It even got a mention on The Andy Griffith Show sometime later. In 1962, Fox gave Jayne one last chance at a mainstream, big-budget picture. Sort of. The movie was called It Happened in Athens. She received top billing in this historical sports dramedy, although she only played a supporting role. The movie was really a vehicle for a guy named Trax Colton, someone Fox was trying to groom into a heartthrob leading man. This was his second and last movie, and his only significant role. The movie was filmed in Greece in 1960. Once again, Jayne was in a movie where the release was held back. The movie was wrong for her. First of all, she was a leading lady, not a towel holder for other leading ladies. Second, the movie was set in 1896 and concerned the comeback of the Olympic Games. I can't help but think that nobody cared about this story, then or now. It's just not very interesting. Third, if you're advertising something as a Jayne Mansfield movie, and it isn't, people are going to be mad. Fox set up Jayne for failure. The movie bombed, and they terminated Jayne and Trax's contracts. Trax never worked again. Jayne still worked, but her movies became even more obscure than before. Also in 1962, there were big troubles in Jayne's marriage to Mickey Hargitay. She was having affairs that were publicly known, and suspected of others that are still up for speculation. Jayne was a passionate woman and liked sex. A lot. In 1963, Jayne decided to do something she hadn't done before, that no one did before. For the first time, Jayne went nude in a movie, but topless only. Promises, Promises was the first Hollywood movie of the sound era to feature nudity by a mainstream star. It was a desperate publicity stunt for sure, and not one that her husband Mickey was in agreement with. He tried to talk her out of it, but it was something she felt she needed to do. He still played a part in the movie, though, as a character called King Banner. It was an odd sort of sex comedy. The movie got a lot of publicity, especially from Playboy magazine. It also received a lot of controversy and got banned in many major US cities. However, in places where the movie was allowed to be shown, it was a box office hit. Strange enough, in this low point of Jayne's professional film career, she was still considered one of the biggest box office draws of 1963. After this, she made several more B movies. Most of the time, she was put with other name actors. Sometimes the parts were big, and sometimes they were merely cameos. None of them were very distinguished. In 1964, after Jayne's divorce with Mickey was finalized, she quickly married director Matt Cimber. In a later interview, Mickey said that he and Jayne should have never divorced. He thought that she regretted it as much as he did. I think Jayne and Mickey should have stayed together. It would have been the best thing for both of them. Her marriage to Cimber was an absolute bust, and they were separated within a year. They did, however, have a child together, named Tony, who was born in late 1965. Jayne became a pretty serious alcoholic by this time. Show business has a way of doing that to people. No one comes out of Hollywood unscathed. She slept around, started doing cheaper burlesque shows, and, I hate saying this, became white trash. There were rumors that she was doing some really, really seedy stuff. I hope it's not true, but there is word that she got into Satanism. I think that's crap, but she obviously needed some help. In 1966, she filmed what became her last real movie, Single Room Furnished. It was not released until 1968, after her death. This was a drama film, and she played 3 different characters. Strange enough, a lot of critics considered this low-budget movie, at the twilight of her career, to have some of her finest acting performances. Also in 1966, Jayne started living with her attorney, Sam Brody. This was not a good relationship, and he was not a good guy. There were physical fights and infidelities on both sides. The worst thing is that, in this period of her life, Jayne became a bad mother. Her oldest child, Jayne Marie, was abused by Sam and mistreated by Jayne herself. Jayne Marie had to live with another relative for a while. 1967 was not a wonderful year for Jayne. On June 29th, Jayne was on her way to a radio station in New Orleans. It was a full car. Jayne, Sam Brody, and their driver were in the front seat. 3 of her children and 4 chihuahuas were in the back. The car was speeding, and around 2:30 in the morning, it crashed into the back of a semi. All 3 adults and 2 of the dogs died instantly. The children survived with minor injuries. This tragedy sadly became the stuff of legend and is as well associated with Jayne as her Hollywood heyday. The biggest myth is that she was decapitated. This didn't happen, but her head was greatly crushed. Police photos of the accident were released, and it's really sick stuff. If you dig hard enough, you'll find them somewhere on the internet, but it's just not cool. I don't like to remember her in this way. A lot of sadness and lawsuits followed this. As it turns out, Mickey was the only one of Jayne's ex-husbands who went to her funeral. The crashed car was saved by a private collector in Florida who used it as a roadside attraction since the 1970s. After that, the car went to LA's dearly departed Tours and Artifact Museum in the 2000s. Once COVID started in 2020, the car went into storage. It's all pretty morbid stuff. Then there are the stories of Jayne Mansfield's ghost at her former home, the Pink Palace. Allegedly, she was upset over all the people fighting over her estate and wanted her children to receive their inheritance. Her wonderful pink home was sold sometime after her death, and it changed hands many times. 2 of its famous owners included Ringo Starr and Engelbert Humperdinck. A lot of tragedy occurred at the Pink Palace after her death for sure. For a while, the place was kept up, but it eventually started crumbling apart. Engelbert, who owned it since 1977, ended up selling it to developers in 2002. In that same year, Jayne's once beautiful home was demolished. Since then, there have been no more ghost sightings. A lot of people wanted the Pink Palace to be kept as a landmark, as it should have been. Fortunately, Jayne's stunning looks and upbeat public persona outshined the sadness that marked her later years. Would she do some things different if she had the chance? I'm sure she would. But Jayne Mansfield was a celebrity in the truest sense of the word, and she took it seriously, even when Hollywood didn't take her seriously. This beautiful entertainer deserves recognition, once again, as a Babe of the Day, Babe of the Day.